Welcome into the Blogger Bowl week, whatever, rivalry week recap, conference
14?
championship early, whatever
13?
it's called. I don't know the numbers. Numbers are overrated. The only number that matters today is 1-0 America. They won. They advanced past Iran. That's why we're coming at you a little bit later today because Dan and I wanted to watch that game. Let's start with there. How you feeling? Yeah, a little shaky after that. For those of you watching live, great. Like, we're watching. We started this literally right after the game. But yeah, if you're watching this not live, we pressed play on this about 5 minutes after the game went final.
Just really proud. A lot of people made so much about how bad this team looked during the friendlies right before the World Cup, and I just didn't think that was that big of a deal. I thought those players had a lot going on. I think it's hard to simulate a World Cup environment and prep for a World Cup in the middle of a season. This has been a really weird World Cup. Obviously, the domestic leagues outside of the United States, at least, are like smack dab in the middle of their seasons. And I had a feeling this team was going to show up and play really well when it mattered. And you kind of left that Wales game wondering, okay, like they didn't kill their chances, but like obviously they made it harder. And then the Wales-Iran game went in a way that they needed the results to go the way that they went these last couple of games. This is the second youngest team at the World Cup, and they have advanced. They beat a good team, like not a great team. Iran's not a great team, but they're a good team, an experienced team, a team that has been in the World Cup before. Where DeAndre Yedlin, who didn't play today, is the only player on this team that has been to a World Cup, played in a World Cup for the U.S., played in 2014. So like for this group to get out and to do this and to achieve this is massive. This was always going to be kind of a warm-up, a dress rehearsal for the U.S. as they get ready to host the World Cup in 4 years. You're going to see all of these guys basically entering their primes, like Pulisic, I think, is 23 or 24. Tyler Adams is early 20s. Weston McKennie, Eunice Musa, like all these guys are young. So this was just kind of let's get some experience and try to get out of the group. Now you're playing with house money. You were kind of expected to get out of the group a little bit. Like you weren't like, oh my God, it's a complete lock. But like
you were favored to, but like if you didn't, it would have been the biggest upset in the world. Exactly. But it would have been disappointment.
Exactly. And now you're playing with house money. You play the Netherlands, who are very talented and very good, but are also kind of prone to switching off and making mistakes. You have a few days, like obviously you want to see Christian Pulisic hopefully get healthy. That would be nice. Left with an abdominal injury after scoring the biggest goal of his life. They're banged up. That was a very physical game. They're guys who we were talking about it off air, like they were gassed.
Yeah, let's get some IVs in those guys right now.
Get some IVs, and they have like the good news is like Qatar is a tiny country. There's not travel involved in this. This wasn't like in Brazil when they're going from Manaus in the middle of the jungle to playing, 3 hours away. Like, no, you're in good shape now to short travel, rest, rehab, get ready to play. And then on Saturday, like, I don't know what time. I don't know if they've announced
8 a.m. Central, 9 o'clock Eastern for you.
Is that when the coverage comes on the air, or is that when the
I believe that's the game starts. So probably what 7:30, or I guess for you 8:30 was when that would start.
Gotcha. So yeah, I mean it'll be on before we get to conference championship games, and I guess as the precursor before we launch into it, I guess my preamble real quick is we might get to kickoff of. We might honestly not have a game on Saturday that matters. Because
Pac-12's on Friday, right?
Pac-12's on Friday, and if TCU is a lock already, and we'll discuss that a little bit later, if they're a lock already, then yeah, we're going to find out like what's going to happen with the Pac-12 on Friday, and then everything else is just kind of window dressing, and it makes you kind of long for that 12-team playoff where every at-large or where every conference champion of the Power 5 and one group of 16 gets into the playoff, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. Like, we'd be talking about Oregon having a chance to play their way in on Friday night. I mean, USC would be locked in now at that point because they get in at large, but like Oregon with a chance to play their way in, Kansas State with a chance to play their way in, LSU, Clemson and UNC, Purdue at like 7-5, and then the winner of the AAC game. Shout out to Tulane, hanging on to Willie Fritz. Georgia Tech.
Yeah, wasn't he going to Georgia Tech, and then now he's not?
I guess they couldn't agree to a deal. I'm guessing Georgia Tech got cheap. That's what happens. Like you don't hire Willie Fritz, and
they're promoting Key.
They're promoting Brent Key. I want to say Brent Pry, who's Virginia Tech's coach.
That's what I keep mixing those guys up. I don't want to insult Brent Key and call him
Brent with 3 letters and a last name that ended in Y. Like it's fairly similar, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that would be what we'd have. But instead, like we just have some fun. They should be fun games. Like I'm excited to watch them. It's our last chance to really watch regular like football with meaning for a while. Like we love bowl games, but if we're being honest, they're usually not the most exciting games in the world, or at least
but like the fact that they're on a Tuesday at 3:30
exactly.
in the afternoon.
The timing, the betting aspect of it. Like we love bowl season, but in terms of like intrigue and things that matter, not so much. But we'll launch into it because the reason I really want to do this. So what we're going to do on Thursday, we're just going to do like a half-hour show on Thursday because Phil is able to carve out half an hour for us, which we're really appreciative of. We're going to pick every game since there's so few conference championship games. We're going to pick all of them on Thursday, but because we only have half an hour, I don't think we're going to have time to jam a recap show and all of that into one. Yeah. So there wasn't a lot to recap this week, but there was one massive result to recap. We can't not
talk about it.
Michigan 45, Ohio State 23. They did it again, Matt. Ohio State got their asses kicked last year by Michigan. They had a year to stew on it. They got them at home, and they got beat worse.
You know, I feel like I've said it a couple times here, and I know I've talked about it a couple times over the years. As talented as CJ Stroud is, there's always, and he's not the main problem. We'll get to the main problem very soon. But I've always thought, like, of all the Ohio State quarterbacks, I hate to use this, like the saying the kids use, but he doesn't really have that dog in him as much as a lot of those other guys did, and kind of just seems resigned to, okay, it's whatever. You even saw in his quotes, like, yeah, I didn't beat him. I didn't beat Michigan. I'll like kind of that shit is what it is. But those guys on the field so clearly took on the mindset of their head coach. You came out on the first drive. We talked about on the show. Everybody talks about scripted drives usually go well because you have all week to think about it. You know, for the most part, what teams are going to come out and do. Ohio State or Michigan came out in a certain way. Ohio State ran their drives, went down pretty easily on that first drive score. And it was like, oh boy, this not quite Michigan State bad from last year, but like Ohio State's in charge. And then they just stopped throwing the ball downfield. Mm-hmm. It was very, very strange. They kept trying to run the ball, and fine, like you still have to run the ball, but you're down your best running back. You have one of the most accurate downfield passers in the country, if not the most. And I can count on one hand how many times they tried pushing it down to Marvin Harrison Jr. 15 yards downfield, and they scored a touchdown on that play. Mm-hmm. It's almost like on 3rd and 4th and short, Ryan Day forgot, hey, I can drop back and throw a quick slant to Marvin Harrison Jr. over the middle. Like, where was that? They just didn't try. They just went into full panic mode. And when your coach goes into full panic mode, it's very contagious. The players kind of start to go into full panic mode, and we don't have a quarterback that, as talented he is, might not have that dog in him. Like, there's not really anyone on the field. Go bring him with him.
Yeah, to me, this game was all about coaching. And I don't necessarily as much in the X's and O's. Like, there were some things that Ohio State did not do well. Their defensive adjustments, once Michigan was able to start throwing the ball, they did not make any adjustments, and their safeties were just atrocious in that game. But to me, it was more like a philosophical kind of identity kind of game. To me, mm-hmm. Michigan did not, they beat them by 22 points. They did not outplay them. This was a game where Michigan had 350 yards of offense on 5 plays and had 3 yards per play the rest of the game on their other offensive snaps. Like, this was not a game where Michigan just lined up for 4 quarters and just ran the ball down their throats and beat them up. Ohio State, you talked about the scripted drive. They drove down the field. They scored. They get the ball back. They go down after Michigan kicked a field goal. They go down. They kick a field goal, but they get it.
They look good on that drive too. Like, they went right back down.
We talked about it again. We've talked about it, though, a couple of times. Like, they've struggled on the right side of the 50 to get in the end zone against good defenses this year. Happened against Iowa a lot in that game, and it happened again here where they go field goal, then they go turnover on downs, and they're just dominating this game, but they're not putting any distance between them. And this was give Harbaugh and Michigan all the credit in the world. Like, they were up against it on the road. Their best player was hurt. They could not run the ball early. Early on, it was just well, J.J. McCarthy, go out and do something. And it wasn't super great early, but they found a way to make a few plays here and there. But as they kind of grew into the game and got confident, Michigan suddenly started to turn the tide on this game. Mm-hmm. And Ohio State didn't have really any answers for it. And we talked about it at the Penn State game, some of the decision making that Ryan Day made didn't seem to make any sense in that game. He got way too conservative in this game. I don't even know if it's just running the ball, punting in plus territory in a game.
That was
when you're trailing.
The 4th and 3 down. I think they were down 4, right? I think when they did it too, or maybe down 3,
something like that. They're down 1 score.
You're Ohio frickin' State. You have the number 1 draft pick. You have next year's number 1 wide receiver. You have a first-round pick at left tackle. You have a running back in Mayan Williams, who is going to be the next, big college running back. And you're punting to pick up 15 yards?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Michigan went back and gained 2 plays later. Like 2 plays later, after the touchback was 2 plays, they're right back where they would have turned it over. Why are you playing for a tie or to not lose with a team that, no offense to Michigan, this is not a shot at them because they played well, that you're more talented than? Ohio State is a more talented football team, and I'm strictly talking talent, than every team in the country outside of probably Georgia this year. I would even say they're more talented than Alabama this year. And you're playing scared. Yeah. You're coaching scared. And on the other side of the football, Jim Knowles has been a very good defensive coordinator. He's playing it the exact opposite way. He's playing it too aggressively. You have their best players out. Blake Corum's out. Donovan Edwards is a fantastic running back. He's the best backup running back in the country. He starts on the majority of college football teams in America, but he's not Blake Corum. You have a quarterback who has not yet proven that he can go down the field and throw his team to a win. And what do? You play zero over the top and just what are you doing? Sit back, let your really solid defensive line and maybe Tommy Eichenberg go get the quarterback and make him pick you apart. Don't give him one-on-one deep ball match. I felt like I never played defense after grade school. I maybe played a couple snaps of defensive line here and there. I could tell you that was a moronic defensive strategy for a quarterback that had yet to prove he could go out and throw and win you a football game. You gave him the chances. You opened the door and gave him wide open throws, and it was like, oh, here you go. Well, I don't think you can go down, but I'm just going to give you a chance to, for a fluke thing to happen, for my quarterback to make a wrong turn, and all you have to do is throw a ball to a receiver without someone with 20 yards. It was mind-bogglingly bad coaching on the part of Ohio State. That's what I'm getting at, and I think that's what anybody could see. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Michigan, but you saw early, Ohio State was the better football team. They were kind of in control of the game, and then the weird coaching decisions happened. Michigan won the war of attrition. They won the football game pretty easily, but it was more like Ohio State for me early. Just let them. They just let them.
Yeah, I've tried to come down off of my is Ryan Day is just a bad coach thing, because the joke, it was funny because it was a thought that I had at the time after the game, and then someone vandalized his Wikipedia page to say he was born on third base. And if you don't know what that means, it's the old adage is someone is born on third base and thinks they hit a triple. Yeah. It basically means they think they have all of the advantages in life. It's like he inherited $1 billion fortune from his parents, and people think that he's smart and good at business because he inherited it. And sure, he was raised to know how to use that fortune and how to run that family business, and he's smarter at it than I am, but he had all these advantages, and he might not actually be that good at it. He might just have all these advantages. This was his first head coaching job. He was never a head coach anywhere else. He wasn't supposed to be the head coach that soon at Ohio State. He basically got promoted to offensive coordinator, and then the Urban Meyer stuff happened, and he just got thrust into the job. Mm-hmm. And they recruit at a high level, but they had been recruiting at a high level every year before he got there for a long time. They have the most talent in the conference by a wide margin. There's only 2 teams every year in that league that should theoretically be able to contend with them based on talent, and that's Michigan and Penn State. Mm-hmm. Nobody else in that league recruits at a level even remotely close to being able to contend with Ohio State. And he's won a lot. I think he's lost 5. That was his 5th loss.
45-6 now, or 45-5. Which I don't remember if it was 45-5 going into the game or after, but irrelevant. Doesn't matter.
That's a great record. But man, you've now lost 2 years in a row to Michigan, and I don't know that he's a plus coach and is ever going to be a plus coach. He could very well someday end up back in the playoff. He might end up in the playoff this year. They're probably a USC loss away from sneaking into the 4 seed, but they could make it to the playoff and they could go on and they could maybe win it. And he might win it down the road at some point because they recruit at a high level. But this is a machine that existed before Ryan Day got there and is going to exist long after he got there. And you can at least say at the very least, low bar to clear, he hasn't destroyed it. But I'm just guessing there are so many coaches who could do what he's doing, which is basically just driving that bus the way he's driven that bus his entire career there. I just don't know that he's adding anything to the equation to make them better. And it's a crazy idea to suggest that the fans are chanting, we want Urban and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I get it. Luke Fickell taking the Wisconsin job leads me to believe that he doesn't think that job's ever opening up anytime soon. Mm-hmm. But man, If they go to Ann Arbor next year and they lose again, and look, they're going to be replacing their quarterback. Like there's just going to be they're not going to be complete. There's going to be roster turn every year because it's Ohio State. They're going to put guys in the NFL at a high level. Like there's no guarantee that they're going to go into Ann Arbor next year and pull out a win. And if he loses again 3 years in a row to Michigan, he becomes John Cooper. He's like, at this point, he's more John Cooper than he is Jim Tressel or Urban Meyer, and that's a problem.
Dan, I'll do you one better. What if they do sneak into the playoffs, play Michigan again, and lose again? Like, and not play a really tight game and lose 37-34 and a really whatever. Say they go to play Michigan again, and it's the same script where they're clearly the more talented team, and then in the end, their team just kind of loses the battle of attrition. They give up, and they end up getting blown out. Like, I will go as far as to say I think Ryan Day's next result against Michigan decides his job status. Like, if he loses if they make the playoff, if they sneak in and they suffer another embarrassing loss to Michigan, you can't bring him back. Like, right. I don't know where you go, but like, I don't think you can. And I get 45-5 is a really good record, but like most of the coaches in the country could coach what he took over to 45-5 in the Big Ten, the way it's kind of been down the last couple of years. Like, and with the talent that they've had, like what he's doing isn't super unique. It's not like he's doing some great coaching job. So maybe I'm being a little rash. Yeah, he's a good, not a great coach, but all that matters, and it's most rivalries, but especially this one, especially with where the Big Ten is right now, where it's kind of a 2.5 team conference. If you can't beat Michigan, which he's proven he can't do, and not really come close, you can't be the head coach at Ohio State.
No,
you can't.
Fair. Yeah, like I mean, it's certainly now. Granted, his he's 3-2 now against them, and this is
one,
or is it 2? Or
he's 2-2.
I think it's 2.
He might even
didn't play. They didn't play in 2020.
No, I think he's actually 1-2. I think he's 1-2 against Ohio State. I'm gonna Google it. I'm pretty sure he's 1-2 against Ohio State.
Against Michigan,
because Michigan.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know. Like, it's just a weird situation. I saw a conversation from some folks on Twitter. If they do play again, if they were to play again, Ohio State would still be favored. I think the 2 points was what I saw this time around. Like, man, I don't know. It's just a bizarre situation, and I don't know what Ohio State does, because you can't keep losing to Michigan like that, and you can't keep like he's been to one champion. He went to a championship game. They were the team that got beat by LSU, right? I'm not making that up.
No, Clemson got beat by LSU.
Clemson got beat by LSU. Oh, did they make a title game? Did they lose to Alabama?
Yeah, they lost to Alabama.
They got crushed by Alabama. They got crushed in 2020, right?
Yeah, they lost like 55, 31 or something. Like the
I just remember the linebacker trying to. I just remember their line, or maybe it was the Clemson line. Whatever. He's been to one championship game. It didn't go well for him. He hasn't been all that close to winning a title. Like,
no.
At a certain point, you got to wonder, like,
they lost to Clemson in that controversial.
Oh yeah,
Fiesta Bowl,
really
I think it was, and then LSU
really
just kicked the shit out of Clemson.
That's right. They would have kicked the shit out of Ohio State too.
They would have too. He hasn't. I feel very weird that it's a coach of of a team that's been this successful, but like he hasn't proven he can. Coach up to Ohio State standards.
I'm with you.
And the fact that Vegas is still it's been getting out there that Ohio State would still be a slight favorite in a playoff game against Michigan also tells you how big of a failure that game was. The last 2 games was really this season is for Ohio State, because you just lost to a team by 22 points and Vegas still thinks you're the better team. And now you're getting punked by recruits who are running off the field, who were there for a visit, running off the field with Michigan, committing to Michigan 10 minutes later. Like, that's going to become a thing if this keeps happening, and you're not going to be the recruiting power anymore. And it's not like Michigan has the best recruiting class in the world this year. They're top 25, but they're not up there with the elite of the elite, and they're stealing your recruits because they're punking you on your own field.
I'm with you, man. It's crazy. The other big result from Saturday, the other big game in terms of playoff positioning, Notre Dame.
Yeah, TCU. I know TCU killed Iowa State. That was by far the other.
No, I want to talk about that one.
No, we can talk about it. We can talk about it.
USC 38, Notre Dame 27. I'll be honest, I didn't watch a ton of this game. It was one of those things where I just was watching it as like, man, it does not feel like Notre Dame's going to hang around. And to their credit, like they didn't get blown off the field, but it just never really felt like they were going to win. It felt like they were a little overmatched. It felt like they had some chances to maybe force some turnovers and make things a little squirrely and couldn't quite pull it off and gave it their best shot, but they kind of just ran into a team that was going to be a bad matchup for them if things didn't go exactly the way they needed it to. No idea until just now Drew Pine threw for 300 yards.
Drew Pine had the game of his life, and it's gonna sound weird to say it in this though. I talked to Phil and I talked through most Notre Dame games and talked afterwards. The difference between there was not that big of a talent difference between those two teams at all outside of the quarterback position. Yeah. That was the difference in that football game. Was USC has the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, and for as well as Drew Pine played, Notre Dame has a backup quarterback who played very, very well. They have backup quarterback playing quarterback for them, and that was the difference. I will say for Notre Dame too, they're down Cam Hart and Tariq Bracy, two of their starting cornerbacks. And I thought for the most part they did an okay job. They did an okay job filling in for those, but I think it was Jaden Mickey who filled in. There were a couple times on third and intermediate, like 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, where they would just run him off and then come back for a quick hitch, and it was just easy pitch and catch, and you were taking advantage of a freshman corner and trying to not get beat over the top. So I thought that was a big loss. But really, the game was decided when Notre Dame was down 10-0. They came back, made it 10-7, moving the ball out of the locker room at half, and Drew Pine, they're in the red zone or just outside of it. Drew Pine loses a fumble on a read option. USC goes down and scores 17-7, and that was kind of the football game. But for the most part, it sucks to lose a rivalry game, but I wasn't super pissed leaving that game. I wasn't like, oh my God, like Notre Dame stinks. I was more like, no, like they played okay. They just played a quarterback who is the best quarterback in the country and played even better. Might even say even better than he played against UCLA.
That's fair. I mean, it's kind of wild. Caleb Williams at DraftKings is minus 2,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. I'll come back to that in 1 second. But 232 passing yards, actually, like statistically, one of his lower outputs of the season. Yeah. He did have 4 total touchdowns in this game. Looking at this, though, like the thing that stands out to me, just looking at the box score, Austin Jones, 25 carries, 154 yards for USC.
He ran the ball really well.
Talked about it when Travis Dye got hurt. Like Travis Dye was a big part of what USC was doing on offense, and Lincoln Riley's offense has always been predicated on the ability to run the football first and foremost, because if you can do that, that's going to open up a lot. And if Austin Jones can continue to run like that, this is a team that's going to be very dangerous. It's going to be very hard for anybody to stop, whether that's Oregon, whether that's whoever they play, probably Georgia in the playoff. That said, I'm still not super convinced about their defense. As far as Caleb Williams and the Heisman Trophy is concerned, we told them last week, give Caleb Williams the Heisman Trophy. I'm glad people are listening to us, and that is what tilted the market, not him beating Notre Dame. I will say I've learned how to bet the Heisman Trophy going forward, which is don't do any preseason research. Don't bet it preseason. Don't think about it preseason at all. And then when the favorite who you have in a parlay has a bad game and a terrible weather spot against Northwestern, just tilt heavily and then bet Caleb Williams at long odds, because I am sitting on a Caleb Williams 15-1 Heisman Trophy ticket.
Look at you.
And I bet during the Northwestern Ohio State game, because CJ Stroud was playing so poorly in that game, I was like, fuck this. I was just tilted. Like I said, I ended up betting him and Bryce Young at 30. Bryce Young is the 6th favorite right now. Can you off the top of your head, can you venture a guess as to who the second favorite to win the Heisman Trophy at DraftKings is? The second favorite?
Still Stroud?
Still not CJ Stroud.
Corum?
Nope.
Is it JJ McCarthy now?
Nope.
Max. I thought it. Okay. Oh, that's right. But I saw a board that had and I think it was just Fox kind of pumping some people's tires to have some, but they had JJ McCarthy on the Heisman shortlist. It was like, guys, he played a great game and he will be a Heisman, contender going into next year. Let's not call him a Heisman guy this year. He's not on the Heisman shortlist this year. Good for Max Duggan though. He's had a great season, won big, and he's going to find himself in New York for a Heisman ceremony. He's not going to win, but still pretty cool to be able to make that trip.
I'm not convinced he's going to be there if he doesn't play well on Saturday. Right now, they're only DraftKings because for whatever reason I can't bet the Heisman on FanDuel in Connecticut. I can bet it on DraftKings and whatever the other book we have. Caleb Williams, Max Duggan, CJ Stroud, Stetson Bennett, Michael Penix, and Bryce Young are the only 6 players who have Heisman odds even listed. If they want to bump Stetson Bennett up to second or third and get him to New York this week, that would be spectacular.
That'd be lovely for your preseason.
That would be lovely. Then I could cash a 15-1 on Caleb Williams to win the Heisman Trophy and a 15-1 on Stetson Bennett to be a top 4 finalist, and then basically end up even on all my bets for the Heisman Trophy this year. The only other game, at least with national championship playoff intrigue this week, was TCU taking on Iowa State. I thought that maybe Iowa State could make things a little squirrely in this game. However, I was very wrong about that. 24-0 at the end of the first quarter, 34-7 at the end of the first half, and 62-14 your final score for TCU, who will now take on Kansas State, who might have beaten them in Fort Worth had Will Howard not gotten hurt in that game after Adrian Martinez got hurt. The only reason I really want to talk about this is because I want to put something out there that absolutely infuriates me. And I might be just paranoid. I honestly might just be paranoid on this. I don't want TCU to make the playoff just as a Texas fan. I don't want another Texas team to go to the playoff that's not Texas. That said, TCU should be a lock to make the playoff. If you took everything that TCU has achieved, 12-0 against the schedule they've played, I'm literally every single result, every single stat, the exact same, and it were Texas or Oklahoma who had the exact same season that TCU had, that team would be a lock for the playoff. That team would not be playing for anything on Saturday. However, because TCU is TCU, they're not viewed as a powerhouse. I'm worried that if they don't win this game, even if it's close, I'm worried if they lose at all, the committee is just going to look for an excuse to put Ohio State in the playoff. Again, I might be completely paranoid about this. However, ESPN says they don't have any influence on what the committee does. I find that to be a load of bullshit.
That's completely wrong. They're in bed with the committee.
It is a made-for-TV event for ESPN, and the way that things have shaken out right now, the perfect playoff for ESPN is Georgia against Ohio State and then Michigan against USC. That is the perfect playoff for them, the way that this season has played out. And so if TCU doesn't win on Saturday, if they do not beat Kansas State, that's the first game up. That's going to be 12 noon, 11 a.m. Central. If they don't win that game, I'm worried that they're going to get left out, which would be just a crime.
TCU needs USC to lose. If TCU now, if TCU goes and loses on a last-second field goal and it's a really close game and they're right there and they play well, I want to say I think they still get in. But if they lose by 10 points, 14 points, they need USC to lose because the committee, as we've seen it in the past with Ohio State, I think it was the first year, and Ohio State actually ended up going on to win the national championship, I think, that year. But, they will do what they can to get Ohio States and Alabama's and Georgia into the playoffs, and that's just what they do. So nothing would surprise me at this point. I think if USC loses, TCU is a lock. But I don't know if USC is going to lose. And obviously, if USC wins, they are very much firmly in there, having redeemed their only loss, being a conference champion. But yeah, that graphic ESPN put out where Ohio State has an 80-something% chance to still make it tells me that TCU needs to be worried if they lose that Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it just scares me, and they should be.
If TCU goes and loses by 21 points to Kansas State and it's not close, all right, you know what? I can, at least in my own head, I wouldn't agree with it, but I could justify it, whatever. I would not agree with it, but I could see a decision being made in that regard. Having said that, if TCU loses a tight one, like an overtime game or a last-second field goal and Ohio State jumps them, that's just complete bullshit.
I'm totally with you. Otherwise, a pretty uneventful week. I didn't get to watch any football on Thursday. Didn't get to watch hardly any NFL.
Watched a little of the Egg Bowl, but not a ton.
Texas shout out to the Longhorns finishing 8-4. I think if you had told me before the season they'd lose by 2 points to Alabama without Quinn Ewers, have the that's another fun thing. Shout out Kansas State, you earned your way in, and Texas certainly made their bed, and they have to lie in it by the way that they played against TCU and Oklahoma State. But Bill Connolly from ESPN has a stat he calls post-game win expectancy, and it basically here's all of the advanced stats, and it comes up with a percentage of how likely that outcome was. The Texas Tech game was the least likely outcome of the college football season. Texas Tech had a less than 2% post-game win expectancy in that game, and that's what ultimately keeps Texas from playing for a Big 12 championship. I think Kansas State has a better chance of beating TCU anyway. And kiss that awesome window of college football in the middle of the day goodbye with the Iowa Minnesota game, the NC State North Carolina game, the UCLA Cal game, all going on at once because the NFL is coming in to take over that time slot next year and try to kill college football more than they have. The NFL is coming to Black Friday, if you haven't heard. Saturday, like we said, fairly uneventful. Iron Bowl, not much. Shout out South Carolina for beating Dabo Swinney. That was pretty spectacular.
That was hilarious.
Shout out
Spencer Rattler's entering the portal again.
Shout out. Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I saw that. He's got because he is. Wow. They got. He's got the. He was able to leave Oklahoma because Lincoln now the portal. So
wow.
I think they said he might be going. What's his name? With the OC to Nebraska.
Okay, interesting.
That Oregon, would be interesting.
Yeah. Oregon really shitting the bed and then backdooring their way into the Pac-12 championship thanks to Washington. Like, there could not have been a more Pac-12 after dark scenario than Washington and Washington State in the Apple Cup both playing to determine who's going to go to the Pac-12 championship game, but neither one of the teams actually playing in the game being involved. That game was a ton of fun. Shout out to Washington, a 10-2 season in year one under Kalen DeBoer, and I think if USC wins on Friday, I think they're going to end up in the Rose Bowl, which right now stands to be Washington versus Ohio State. And I tweeted it yesterday. If it ends up being Washington, Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, that total could start with an 8, and I'm still betting the over.
Yeah, I would love to see that matchup because it would be basically last year's matchup in a nutshell. I think it'd be kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Just a ton of points, nonstop scoring.
We will very likely be seeing a different Ohio State quarterback because I cannot imagine CJ Stroud's going to play in that game.
No, I don't think. I think you won't see Stroud. You for sure wouldn't see Jackson Smith and Jigba.
And Trey Anderson probably not playing either.
He's not eligible to go pro yet, is he? Though?
I don't think
he's got to come back one more. But if he's kind of even banged up,
there's some rumor that he might not be around. Like, I don't know what's going to happen there. All right, so there's not a ton going on Friday, so we'll go game by game. We're not going to get super deep into it. There is a game I do want to bet that's not a conference championship game. I just realized.
What we talked about on Brown Bag this morning?
No, that I'm going to bring that up. So what we're going to do on Thursday, we're going to go game by game. What we're going to do is we'll explain this again on Thursday. We're going to pick every game. So the true spirit of the Blogger Bowl, which last year started with Matt and Phil, at least on the Betsperts platform, started Matt and Phil picking every bowl game. We're going to do that with the conference championship game as a little kind of contest between all of us. I made the executive decision today, Matt. We're going to do a tiebreaker in case someone ties. And the tiebreaker, okay, after we do our picks, whatever, before Friday, we are going to guess the total points scored in the Akron-Buffalo makeup game. And whoever without going over, if there's a tie in terms of our picks on Friday and Saturday, that will be the tiebreaker. Whoever gets closest to the final score or total points.
Price is Right rules without going over.
Right rule can't go over. But that in case you missed Brown Bag Bets are unaware, Buffalo is 5-6. They did not apply for a special waiver for bowl eligibility, so they had a game with Akron postponed. When that snowstorm hit Buffalo, of course, you remember the Bills having to go play in Detroit. They just postponed the Buffalo-Akron game. So they're playing Friday at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. That's going to be awesome as opposed to 1 p.m. in the morning. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it could be. Never know.
But yeah, so two teams they are applying for – they're making up their game. New Mexico State finished 5-6. They applied for a special bowl waiver. They had a game with San Jose State postponed, sadly, because the San Jose State player died. They postponed the game. They're not going to make that up. So they applied for bowl eligibility waiver. We'll see what happens there. And then we might get some 5-7 teams because of APR into bowl games. So that would be fun. But in case you were wondering, Buffalo an 11.5-point favorite. The total there.
Lions dropped. They were 2.5 this week.
It has dropped sub. All right, so our first conference championship game on Friday, we talked about USC trying to play their way into the Pac-12 championship game, and I don't know why I thought Oregon backdoored their way into the conference championship game. You should have corrected
Utah.
That. They're playing Utah. USC, a 2.5-point favorite. Of course, Utah beat them in Salt Lake City. 2.5 points. USC, a favorite. 66.5 is the total.
I mean, over. I'm just
it certainly feels like 66.5 is.
Yeah. I don't know who's going to win this game. I probably lean towards USC. It seems like everything's kind of rolling their way, but I'm just going to take the over because if there's one team that can kind of veteran squeal their way into stealing this one, it's probably Utah. So I'm going to just take the over, root for points, and I think we'll see a lot of this one.
There you go. The Conference USA Championship, North Texas taking on UTSA. UTSA, an 8.5-point favorite. The total there, 67.5. All I know is UTSA very banged up at a lot of spots. I don't think it's going to matter in terms of the game, but it might make things dicey in terms of them covering against a North Texas team who we thought was going to fire their coach all year and then found a way to make it to the Conference Championship game. I don't really have any other thoughts there. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I got nothing on this one.
Friday night as well. Cool. We have 2 games on Friday. Saturday at noon, we talked about this game also. Kansas State should have beat TCU, could have beat TCU. I don't say should have. Could have during the regular season. TCU a 2.5-point favorite. The total is 61.5. Also kind of feels overish to me.
Yeah, I think I might just throw in a bunch of overs on conference championship weekend and watch them.
And pray. The MAC championship game, Toledo taking on Ohio. Toledo, a 1.5-point favorite. The total there, 55.5. Does your underdogs? I mean, this one's tough, man. This is an underdog and your Ohio Bobcats.
I'm going with the Bobcats. That's my pick. That's my play. Right. I was a little bit worried about how they'd look without Curtis Rourke last week, and they look just fine. So I'm taking the Bobcats.
Seems like a decent step up in competition, at least from what
it does
last week.
Still taking them.
In the Sun Belt Conference, Coastal Carolina visits Troy. Troy, 8.5-point favorite. 48.5 is the total there. Grayson McCall, TBD status. He is on the early end of a projection from his injury that was going to have him out 3 to 6 weeks. This has been 3 weeks. There's no reason for Jamie Chadwell to tip his hand, so he hasn't done that. But I don't know, man. I don't think they've been really bad without him. So
yeah, that's I'm not touched for me just because the one team's quarterback and probably the best player on the field is questionable. I'm not going to go near it.
Yeah, that's a no bet, but we're going to have to make a pick on that. So we'll put some thought into that. The SEC championship game, Georgia against an LSU team that just lost to Texas A&M. Georgia, 18.5-point favorites. 50.5 is the total. I thought this might be an under game, but 50.5 fairly low for college football. Still might be underish.
Yeah, I'd
like Georgia to stop their food.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for in this game. We've seen them do it in certain moments, like Tennessee when they had to. They just didn't play with their food. They went out and dominated the football game. Florida, for the most part, they went out and dominated the football game, let them back in a little bit late, but it was never really in doubt. I'm kind of thinking they do that here, especially with LSU coming off that loss. I know they have a chance to play for a conference title, but they also just squandered their chance at a playoff, and with how everything broke, it was probably win and in for them. I don't know. I kind of lean towards Georgia here in a big way, but I think if I'm leaning towards Georgia in a big way, I'd probably go Georgia in and over in this one because I think LSU will still score a few points here and there. But I think after that loss to A&M, like that Georgia's been kind of LSU's been kind of playing with their food the last couple weeks now. Lost to A&M, barely escape Arkansas with a backup quarterback. It seems like they're kind of regressing back to what they are, which isn't a bad football team, just not a playoff team.
Yeah, Georgia 37-14 winners over Georgia Tech, and just very uninspired performance again from them. I just think they're 2 teams that are better on defense than they are on offense. I think Jaden Daniels might be a little banged up too. So we'll see what happens there. In the Mountain West Conference, Fresno State visiting the Blue Turf. I'm pretty sure
sure.
Boise State 3.5-point favorite, total 54.5. Go to our shorts page on the YouTube, the BetSports YouTube page, and look at just one of the grossest bad beats of the year, how Boise State covered against Utah State. We have to do a little bit of digging and some looking into some things there to try and kind of come up with a bet there, because these are 2 teams who looked like they were declining early on in the season. Boise State, the Jake Haener got hurt against USC, and they were without him for a while, and they managed to tread enough water without him, which is actually very impressive for them. But Boise State fired their OC, quarterback enters the transfer portal, and they somehow got better. It's amazing how that works.
I'm probably just going with an over in that game because I don't really have too big of a feel on it. Both teams are a little bit unpredictable, and I'm going to want to see points on the Blue Turf.
Central Florida at Tulane. Tulane, a 3.5-point favorite, total 56.5. This is a rematch of a game that happened just a couple of weeks ago, and Central Florida was pretty well dominant in that game. Tulane, though, getting a boost with Willie Fritz. I
was going to say, I like that.
An interesting spot. Tulane playing for their first major bowl game in a very, very long time. I talked about it when those 2 teams played the first time. It was like 1930-something, I think. Or maybe, it was 1940. The 1940 Sugar Bowl was the last time, because that was the year A&M won they lost to A&M, and A&M won the national title, which is A&M's last national title. So we'll see. I mean,
what was the spread on this one? You say again?
3.5. Tulane's favorite.
I'd probably lean UCF.
UCF coming off a very uninspiring performance against South Florida, game they probably should have lost, but found a way to win because, well, that's what South Florida does. This one we're not going to pick, but I'm just going to tell you to go ahead and bet Jackson State minus 17.5 against Southern in the SWAC championship game.
Sure.
They beat them 35-0 at home earlier this year. This isn't going to be like the Celebration Bowl last year where South Carolina State put it on them. I think that playing at home, Jackson State should put another beatdown on Southern. The ACC championship game, Clemson, a 7.5-point favorite against a North Carolina team coming off another loss to NC State. That's back-to-back losses for that team. DJ Uiagalelei was terrible again against South Carolina. They say that he is still the starting quarterback there. 63.5 is a lot, but this kind of feels like the situation with Wake Forest and Clemson earlier this year where, man, Clemson might just be liable to give up a lot of points to North Carolina.
Yeah, kind of just looking at points here. I know North Carolina's offense has been not good the last couple of weeks, but they still have a really good quarterback. They still have some playmakers. And you're going to see a very uninspired Clemson team, in my opinion. I think the offense will be able to move the ball because Carolina's defense is so bad. Like NC State was able to put up points on them. But defensively, I just kind of think, I don't want to say fully checked out, but like season's kind of over. I don't, not to say an ACC championship doesn't mean a ton, but to a class and a team that's, wins it every year, it doesn't really mean a ton. So I would probably just lean points on this one.
That's fair. And then the final game of the night, I guess technically at the same time, the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis, Purdue taking on Michigan. Michigan, a 16.5-point favorite. The total there is 51.5. If you are unaware, Aiden O'Connell has been away from the team this week. His brother died, sadly.
Jesus, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so his family undergoing a personal tragedy.
Oh, God.
Been with his family. Hard for me to imagine him not playing despite everything that's going on for what he's meant to that program, to that team. And the fact that he said in his statement that his brother was a huge Purdue fan, like there was no bigger Purdue fan than his brother, leads me to believe that he's going to play in this game. Regardless of that situation, I've already went and laid him with Michigan. Like Purdue's 7, like Purdue's not very good. Like,
yeah, I don't like.
This kind of feels like last year. I mean, granted, you're a different situation. Iowa all defense.
Feels like Purdue might be able to score a few more points than Iowa did last year because Iowa's offense was just inept. But yeah, this just kind of feels like last year. I would, if I had to, I'm probably not going to touch it, but if I had, because I don't know the health of Michigan at this point. I don't know how Blake Corum is. Obviously, Donovan Edwards had injury issues of his own, and they're a running back going down away from kind of being a little one-dimensional offensively. But not to say that they won't win a football game there. But I'm not going to touch. I think the points. I don't know. That's a weird one. I do want to ask though. Do you remember who gave out Purdue at plus 600 to win the Big Ten West? Excuse me, at the beginning of this year.
That'd be Mr. Matthew Rooney. Matt Rooney all over it.
They backed into it, but they still won it.
They did everything they can. They did everything they can to not win that conference.
Was their win total 6.5 or 7.5?
I think it was 6.5.
Okay, I think so too. But that would be pretty hilarious if I hit my Big Ten West winner, but didn't hit my over 7.5 wins total. I think you're right. I think it's 6.5. Purdue wouldn't have been 7.5.
Man,
Tennessee was 7.5. They wouldn't have been on the same wavelength.
So there you have it. Yeah, man. I don't know, man. It's a bummer that this is basically it.
Where did all the time go?
We have the games this weekend. We will do and we kind of, the way that I kind of in my head figured it, we'll do 3. We'll basically do a preview show for all of the bowl games. For each week of bowl week. So basically it's divided out into 3 weeks, and then we can just go long when we get to the semifinal and those, and then we'll do a final. We can also talk some Army Navy next week. I think Navy had the better uniforms. I
liked Army's. I did. I thought the color blending into look like kind of the mud splatter from the tanks, I thought looked really cool. I like both of them, and like every year both of these teams hit home runs with their uniforms, and they
all-time uniform game every year, despite the fact that they change them.
I think my favorites I've ever seen from this were the one year it snowed and Army wore all white. Look, and obviously you can't plan to have all white in the snow, but the way it worked out was just unbelievably cool. And then the years Navy did the helmets with the warships that were custom to whatever your class, I think it was. Unbelievably cool. The detail into it, so badass. But every year, it's just they make fantastic uniforms.
That was the all-time best for sure. Yeah. I like the Panda Commando ones, like the Army ones, just because I think anything with a panda with a weapon is pretty cool. So we'll have that. But like I said, we'll be back on Thursday. I think 2:00 normal time, just half-hour show. Phil will be with us, so we're excited to have him. We will pick every game, a little contest between all of us. No prize, nothing at all. Just like a little bit of fun to kind of give us a reason to talk about every single game that is
warm up to lead into the bowl games.
And a warm up to bowl games. And we get a bowl game on Friday because Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon is a bowl game ass time for a football game. So we will do that. So we will be
Friday afternoon action.
We will be back on Thursday. Like I said, Phil will be there. Matt will be there. So that's Matt. I'm Dan. We will be back then. We will talk to you soon.